Toronto is building lots of subways right now, 40 kilometers to be exact, from the Ontario Line and Yonge North subway extension to the Scarborough and Sheppard subway extensions. What's not talked about as much, though, is better transit without the need for more subways, instead using regional rail. By upgrading existing rail corridors and expanding the GO train network, even more neighborhoods of Toronto can be served by higher order transit, while also serving the suburban cities in the GTA. GO Transit is undergoing a massive long-term expansion with input from several agencies, including Deutsche Bahn, one of Germany's rail operators. As part of the project, the core GO train lines, such as the Lakeshore, Stouffville, Kitchener, and Barrie lines, will be transformed with electric trains every 10 minutes or better. There have been hints that the plan could operate every 5 minutes or better, but it's unclear whether that's actually going to happen. While it's taking a long time, GO expansion will effectively turn the core of the GO network into an express metro service, with similar frequencies to the subway, slightly longer station spacing, and higher speeds. With this new era of regional rail for Toronto, it's time to build the frequently discussed Midtown GO train line, providing faster trips through Midtown and Scarborough, and to rethink the underutilized Richmond Hill GO line, providing faster and more reliable north-south trips through the center of the city. Earlier this year, the Ontario Conservative Party announced their plans for GO 2.0 during the election campaign. And while they did win the election, it's a much more ambitious project. This video is purely going to assess how practical upgrades to the Richmond Hill line and building the Midtown line could be done, separate from the GO 2.0 project. The Midtown GO line has been proposed for ages, and as new mid-rise housing is quite literally touching the rail corridor, neither the TTC or Metrolinx seems to be increasing service for the increased demand. DuPont is currently only served by half-hourly buses, and while the city is studying turning it into a complete street, it's still very car-centric. While various cities like Cambridge, Milton, or Mississauga could act as the terminus of the Midtown GO line, the core trunk would be between Cooksville GO or a future Mississauga City Centre station along the Midtown line, parallel to Dundas, DuPont, and then northeast to Sheppard and McCowan, making connections to Line 1 at both DuPont Station and Summerhill Station, which once housed a rail station. Near Sheppard and McCowan, a connection could be made to the Line 2 Bloor Danforth subway, and depending on the alignment of the in-development Line 4 Sheppard subway extension, an additional connection could be made there. Eventually, the Midtown line could also be extended to Peterborough. As tempting as it is to say, let's add connections to all the GO train lines too, it's unfortunately not practical in this case. While the Midtown line crosses paths with 4 GO lines, almost none of the crossings are suitable for interchange stations. Take the junction. With the Midtown, Milton, Kitchener, and Up Express lines, it's a great hub on paper, but the area simply isn't built for a station, especially with all the complex freight and passenger train movements. Similarly, the Davenport Diamond sees the Midtown and Barrie GO lines cross paths, but given the height difference and lack of space, building a station here would be incredibly difficult. The Stouffville line crossing could be doable, but because it's less than 500 meters from a recently upgraded station, it's a bit too close to add another one or to shift an entire station over. That's not to say the project wouldn't work, and we'll get to why the lack of connections with other GO lines is actually okay in a minute. Much of Canadian Pacific's existing Midtown rail corridor runs through areas that are seeing major development, making it a perfect time to build rapid transit. The area surrounding Dundas and DuPont used to be mostly a light industrial area, but several mid-rise condos are popping up on almost every block, adding hundreds, if not thousands, of new homes right next to the tracks. Moving further north, the close proximity to the Eglinton Crosstown, Ontario Line, and Scarborough subway means tons of transit-oriented developments, as well as major park space becoming more easily accessible. To simplify the video, we're only talking about the stations in the Toronto section, but as mentioned earlier, the line could extend to any number of cities. Starting at Kipling, the Midtown line could use the existing Milton GO line platform, although with high frequencies, it would be beneficial to build new platforms with tracks separate from Canadian Pacific operations. Kipling is already a hub connecting 3 transit agencies, Line 2 of the subway network, and express buses to Pearson Airport. Surrounding Kipling Station is the ongoing 6 Point Street development, adding thousands of units within a 10-minute walk. Roughly 5 kilometers away, a future Stockyard station could be built at Jane and St. Clair, connecting to the 27 and 935 Jane buses along Toronto's 7th busiest bus corridor, which is finally getting bus priority lanes as well. A short extension of the St. Clair streetcar would provide a high-quality tram to regional rail transfer, but isn't essential for the station's ridership. Over at Dufferin, another station could be built connecting to Toronto's 4th busiest bus corridor and major residential towers which are springing up, parks, and a new community center. The next 2 potential stations would connect to the TTC's Line 1 subway at the existing DuPont and Summerhill stations. Both stations would be directly bordered by mid-rise condos and shops. Already proposed as part of Metrolinx's previous big move plan, and once a railway station, is Millwood. A station here would provide access to both Thorncliffe Park and Leaside, and only be a few minutes away from the Ontario line. We'll be talking about realigning the Richmond Hill line later in the video, but Millwood would also be the easiest place to provide a connection between the Midtown and Richmond Hill GO lines. Near Eglinton and Don Mills, the CPKC rail corridor crosses over both the Eglinton Crosstown and a future extension of the Ontario line. However, both stations would be complicated to build. At Eglinton and Leslie, widening the rail corridor would be challenging, while finding space for stairs and elevators in the middle of Eglinton is near impossible. Any station here would likely involve a short out-of-station walk between the Eglinton Crosstown's Sunnybrook Park station and the GO lines. At Don Mills, the location of the rail corridor would interfere with stop spacing of the Ontario line, but might be warranted for a connection to the North-South Transit line. A huge community is also being built next to the rail corridor here, so a station would be hugely beneficial. Finishing off the main trunk would be two stations in Scarborough, one at Warden and Ellesmere and one at McCowan and Shepherd. Warden and Ellesmere is fairly low density but could be easily upzoned and would provide connections to frequent local and express buses on some of Scarborough's main east-west and north-south bus routes. McCowan and Shepherd, on the other hand, would offer a connection to the Scarborough subway extension with quick trips to Scarborough Town Centre, while again serving nearby residents and bus riders. Unlike the Midtown line, GO Transit already operates the Richmond Hill line, but because of its slow speeds and commuter-focused service, its potential is unrealized. GO Transit currently operates 4 trains into the city in the morning and 5 out in the evening. Great for the 9-to-5 office worker who parks their car at the suburban train stations, but not a compelling transit option for any other scenario. While the Relief Line and Ontario Line have been seen as the solution to overcrowding on the subway, especially at Bloor-Yonge Station, upgrading the Richmond Hill Line is a quick and affordable way to relieve the subway network. Today, the Richmond Hill Line winds through the Don Valley, the twists and turns severely slowing down the route, leading to trips between Union and Finch taking 35 minutes, compared to the nearly identical time on Line 1, with the main difference being much better reliability and the lack of slow zones on GO compared to the TTC. And yes, I'm aware that the route becomes more time efficient north of Toronto. To reduce travel times, the line should be shifted to the Don branch, which splits off of the existing route near Riverdale Park. Rebuilding the Leslie Spur north of Eglinton would allow for train service again, and there's still enough space in the corridor for a multi-use path similar to the Don Mills Trail today. The alignment would require upgrades as the Don branch hasn't been used in a long time, although Metrolinx had, up until a few years ago, intended to use it for a new rail yard. Alto, Canada's high-speed rail project, will almost definitely use this corridor as well, so it'll need to be redeveloped no matter what. Crossing the Don Valley, the existing bridge can only fit one track, which won't really affect frequency for such a short portion. However, rebuilding the bridge and adding a second track is inevitably going to happen. On the joint corridor with CPKC, 2 stations can be built, one at Millwood Road and one at Eglinton, with the latter connecting to the Eglinton Crosstown. Both stations would also connect to the proposed Midtown GO line. A flyover across the CPKC rail corridor is essential, but apart from the stations, it's the most significant piece of new infrastructure on the entire route. The Leaside Spur could either be built with tracks next to the trail, or trains could operate on an elevated guideway above the trail, similar to the Davenport Greenway project in the West End. This was studied by the province roughly 15 years ago, but was dropped when the city bought the right-of-way for the trail. It's not impossible to do by any means. Realigning the route shaves off roughly 4 kilometers and straightens out the alignment, allowing for faster service, and with those time savings, more stations can be added in Leaside and Thorncliffe Park, connecting to the Midtown line, and another at York Mills and Leslie, serving the surrounding area. A station in the Brickworks would provide better transit access to a huge park, although even a small station could be too disruptive for the natural environment and might not have enough value, so isn't necessarily the most needed station on the route. Another infill station should totally be built on the eastern waterfront, connecting to the Portlands and Distillery District at Cherry Street. I mentioned earlier that there wouldn't be many connections between existing GO lines, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Through Ontario's One Fare program, connecting between GO and local transit agencies is much cheaper than years past, which will encourage taking the subway or bus to these new lines, of which there are numerous connections. In an ideal world, both the station at Eglinton and Millwood would be built, providing 2 hubs. However, in a time of rising transit costs, it might be smarter to invest a bit more in a big hub at Leslie and Eglinton, between Line 5, the Midtown line, and the Richmond Hill line. Outside of the realignment, Oriole Station near Leslie and Shepherd is proposed to be shifted north to better connect with the Shepherd subway and under construction the residences at Central Park development just north of Shepherd. Improved regional rail here would also serve one of Toronto's main IKEAs and a high-density community roughly 5 minutes away around Edinona-Wistina Park and Bessarion subway station. Old Commerce Station would also better allow residents in the area to quickly travel either downtown or to Richmond Hill by transit. Upgrading the Richmond Hill line would be the easiest out of the two projects. The Don branch is already owned by Metrolinx, and the Leaside Spur, which is owned by the city, could either be used through a partnership or from the province buying it from the city. Only 3 kilometers would be shared with Canadian Pacific Kansas City Southern's railroad. Most of the corridor is already wide enough for 2 tracks to be added, which wouldn't interfere with freight traffic. The upgrade would likely take less than 5 years to complete and could occur with minimal disruptions. Almost all of the track to Richmond Hill Center, a future high-density community connecting to Line 1, would be Metrolinx owned, which could allow for all-day service between Union and Richmond Hill Center using only 4 to 6 trains and come every roughly 12 minutes. The Midtown line would be more challenging, as Metrolinx would need to have an agreement with Canadian Pacific to use their corridor. There's enough space in the majority of the corridor to quad track without much hassle, but this line would probably be built within 7 years, buffering in 5 years for studies and prep work. I don't think a 12-year total timeline is impossible. That being said, Canadian Pacific would have to shift some of their operations, although they could still retain pretty substantial access to both the corridor and their rail yards. Rather than using GO's classic bilevels, both lines could use smaller diesel or ideally electric multiple units, similar to Ottawa's new Sadler fleet, which would work especially well on the Richmond Hill line. If the Midtown line were built to its full potential between Peterborough and Cambridge, a more substantial fleet would definitely be needed. I've obviously simplified both projects. These lines should be extended farther than Toronto, and it's more than just lines on a map. However, the core concept of relieving both Line 1 and 2 of Toronto subway by utilizing existing infrastructure is a relatively simple task compared to building new right-of-ways, with the main complexity being coordinating between freight rail operators. Both of these projects will unlock faster and easier ways to get around Toronto and the GTA, making them the obvious next step in transit construction. Thanks for watching.